I'd like to call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. And first I need a motion to adopt the agenda for the January 18th, 2020 Committee of the Whole meeting be adopted with the amendments of a third-party development, under the closed session item, it's a third-party development FOIP section 16, 1A, 2, and B. Can I get a motion for that? Councillor Chenard makes that motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? All those in favor? Motion carried. And can I get a motion that the minutes of the January 14th, 2020 Committee of the Whole meeting be adopted as presented? Councillor Bevan makes that motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? All those in favor? Motion carried. And first off, I believe we have a delegation from the Red Bricks Art Centre and Museum. If you don't mind stepping forward.
We all just look scary.
Oh, yeah. And take a seat, please. Take a seat. Yeah, take a seat if you don't mind.
Take a seat, okay.
Yeah. And if you would mind introducing yourself, and then council can introduce themselves as well.
Absolutely. My name is Joanne Fosham, and my colleague is Joanne Belmont. So you've got Joanne's in full force tonight.
Okay, and we'll just do introductions starting with the mayor.
Mayor Kevin Zahara, welcome.
Councillor Troy Sorensen.
Councillor Janet Wilkinson.
Deputy Mayor Crystal Byer.
Councillor Jean Chenard.
Councillor Jackie Curry.
Trevor Bevan.
Okay, if you'd like to proceed. Thank you.
Certainly. We had invited council over, I think, about a year and a half ago, and I think most of you were there, but for those who may not have been, I'll just do a quick recap about what the Red Brick is. It was built in 1913 and it was one of the finest schools in the province at that time. Today it's a municipal historic resource and a provincially accredited museum. It's independently owned and operated by ECHO, Edson Cultural Heritage Organization. The governing body of the Red Brick is a group of volunteers who want to preserve the beauty and history of Edson. This nonprofit group relies on fundraising, donations, and sponsorship to keep the Red Brick and its programs running. The board donates in excess of 3,000 hours every year for the various programs and events that we run. We're home to the FCSS in the basement, Tilly's Tea Room, a small gallery, the Jean Hatlin Theatre, and a dance studio. Our museum preserves the scholastic history of Edson and provides tours for tourists, school groups, historians, and local residents at no charge. And I'm not sure if it's indicated on your information, but we are approaching council for a request for funding. And I have a letter that we have drafted that we would like to leave with you. It says, "Thank you so much for your funding and support over the last several years. It has been very much appreciated and has been very helpful in providing programs and events at our facility. We have been working hard to provide cultural needs for our town, along with preserving the educational history of this area. We have enjoyed success in those efforts, and our facility utilization has increased very significantly over the last few years. We have sold out performances in our theatre, full attendance at summer camps and carnival, fully booked art gallery, over 200 dance students in our dance studios 4 days a week, and over 600 people passing through your FCSS drop-in center, currently residing in our building, throughout their annual programs. Our tea room is booked frequently for many cultural, family, and educational events. In promoting our facility, we have strived to keep tickets and registration fees at a level that all area residents can participate regardless of their economic situation. To that end, you have provided $15,000 annually for the last 10 years. As you are very aware, costs of maintenance and operation have increased significantly over that period of time. The consumer price index over that 10-year period has increased 19%. We're also very aware of the struggling Alberta and Canadian economy. With all these factors in mind, we respectfully request the following. A funding increase of $1,000 in 2020. A funding increase of $1,000 in 2021. A funding increase of $1,000 in 2022. This represents a 20% increase over the 3 years, which essentially matches the CPI increase. This modest increase will help us to continue with all our programs and events. We're reluctant to increase rents or fees levied, as this would lead to the exclusion of those unfortunate families enduring economic difficulty. We are also currently actively researching grant sources and community partners to help us in our mission. If you have any questions, if we can't answer them, we can certainly get the information back to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your presentation. We'll start with Mayor Zahara.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Just a question through the chair to our delegation. The $15,000 per year, does that include the rent for the family center, or is that over and above?
No, that's over and above. That's for the programming.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Chenard?
Yes, actually, thank you for the history. It's a good review. So the $1,000 per year, that's just over and above, like what you explained.
Yeah, the
to us.
15,000 plus 1,000 would be
Right.
16 in 2020, 17,000 in 2021, 18,000 in 2022.
Okay. So that's what I'm just looking at. So that would be your increase in cost of operating the building, because I do
That's
like
right.
your comment about it. So when you have functions happening, do you charge for that? Like if they use any of the building, is there a fee
Yes.
associated to that?
Yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's in the budget, it is 1,000, but then when you hit the second year, now it's 2,000, because we're doing 1,000 plus. So by the time we hit 3, then we went from 15 to 18. So
Correct.
we'd have to, I mean, we have to definitely consider it.
Mm-hmm.
It is a reasonable request, but with that said, everyone's running into trouble,
Yeah.
so we have to view it all. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's,
Yeah.
I understand the request, so I imagine we'll take it for information, and I'd like to read.
Okay, I'd like to leave this letter so that if you would like to refer to it.
Councillor Bevan?
Through the chair, Joanne. You guys still do your casinos and that, eh?
Yes, we go up to Fort McMurray every year and a half to 2 years. We've been grandfathered in there, so we take
That's it.
2 days going up and down and back, and we spend 2 days, I guess,
Yeah.
up there working.
And that is.
And we work there because we can do much better than if we are sent to a casino in Edmonton. But that funding is really dropping. Oh my.
That was my next question. is
Yeah,
go up to Las
yeah.
Vegas,
At one point in time, they would send us between $60,000 and $65,000. Last time we went, it was 35.
Cut you in half just.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Curry?
Through the chair, would you ladies happen to know your guys' operating costs for the year?
I have last year's financial statements
Oh,
with me.
thank you.
Total costs were $156,000. And total revenues were $168,000, but 40,000 of that, I'm sorry, it says 40,000, but there's a timing issue. That's probably from our 2018 casino, because we don't receive it until, the month or two following the end of the quarter. So I think that would probably be before, because it's been steadily dropping. Of that, we have approximately between $85,000 and $90,000 for our staff. They're all part-time girls. I had some breakdowns as well in terms of the revenues. Our fundraising efforts account for about 26.5%. Rentals and leases are 42.3%. And we really can't see ourselves increasing it because we have been kind of doing that over the last couple of years. And again, if we keep increasing, we're going to exclude some that just couldn't afford. Municipal funding, which is the monies from you, 12.7%. Donations, about 7.6. Grants, 4.8.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Wilkinson.
To the two Joannes, I'd like to compliment you. Thank you for giving us a presentation. And I'm really impressed by the 3,000 hours of work that you volunteer. I really do appreciate it. And we can take it under consideration. And I know you say you're reluctant to increase fees, but you think it's the same people that we have to increase taxes on to get the same money. So it's sort of
Yeah, it's kind of
a
a
little
little
bit of a
whammy.
circle.
Yeah.
And you're lucky to get Fort McMurray. We could get about 19,000 from St. Albert.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
wow. I'll wait. Thank you though for your presentation.
Okay. We don't have any other questions. Thanks again for the presentation. We don't make decisions at committee, I believe, on a presentation when you're asking for some financial increases, but we'll take it under consideration and then direct administration, I believe. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you so
You're,
much.
you're
Thank
welcome
you.
to stay if you'd like, but if you'd rather leave, then that's fine as well.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, we will move on to the reports from staff. We'll do the executive office. First up is the strategic planning session matrix, which I believe CEO Derricotte will be presenting.
Thank you. I don't have a lot to add other than what's there in the report for you. The only difference you'll see now is we asked council to each rate the items as a high, medium, or low priority. And to be clear again, that this is in relation to each other, not necessarily in relation to other activities that the town has going on. We compiled that data and then have just applied it now to the matrix, and so it's now in front of council for comment and consideration.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? I just want to say to CEO Derricotte and administration, thanks for putting that together. It definitely, I think, makes it easier for me to kind of understand where we're going to be heading. How often do we expect to see this reported back?
Thank you. Our intent is that council would review this document quarterly.
Okay. Okay, if we don't have any other, okay. Mayor Zahara?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Byer, and thank you for administration for putting this together. I think this will help us out a lot in terms of ensuring that things are tracked and we're staying on task, and hopefully give direction to administration on what they should be focusing on, what council sees as the highest priorities. So thank you, and I know Ms. Parsons, Ms. Dorick has also been very involved in this, so thank you for your work on that.
Councillor Sorensen?
Yeah, through the chair to administration, yeah, I just wanted to kind of echo those same comments. Great job, and I like the fact that we kind of mathematically got all of our comments together and found an average. I love that. And just a comment that the way I viewed the ranking system, I viewed the high ranking as hopefully something that we can tackle on in the current fiscal, and then medium, you know, out maybe 2 years out, and the low is a 3-year priority. But that's just how I approached it, and hope that we can proceed at that rate.
Okay. Councillor Bevan?
Through the chair, CEO Derricotte. I like what we've all done here and that. Will we get a say on what we want to you to concentrate on, say it was a high or medium or whatever that? Now I know there's a lot here that all the departments here are going to have to look at, but we got the next year. Is there going to be something that we can concentrate on that you will see through our office that would benefit us more than just trying to go through everything all at once?
Thank you through the chair. Thank you, Councillor Bevan. So some of the activity will be dependent on which department is associated with it. Not all departments are represented equally in terms of, so for example, if planning and development has 6 or 8 different priorities, it may take them longer to move through And so they may not get to a medium or low priority for longer than another department that maybe only has a medium priority. They're going to engage that with available capacity immediately. Also, as we look at this list, I think it becomes pretty clear that there's a number of them that are connected and linked. And so you may have reports come back specifically on items saying, we recognize that this has been placed at a high priority, but this medium priority being completed will actually benefit us in terms of freeing up capacity to address the bigger, higher priority. So there's a number of different ways that council may see or hear administration approach this. As council has suggested, I think it's helpful for council to kind of be able to see where these things stack up. But as helpful as it is for you, I can assure you it is even more helpful for us administratively to have a feel for what council wants us to focus on. In fact, as soon as the rankings were done, there's a middle where you say, well, there's a few that we had kind of engaged sooner that we might not have if we had had this information sooner. So certainly we're looking forward to ensuring that our efforts are as in line as possible with council's priorities and council's direction, and we think this will be an important tool.
So when we go to retreat, we'll see more green checks on here.
Sure, yes. Thank you through the chair. There's a number of these that are very near to completion already, and every year at strategic planning session that council goes in, this document will obviously be a part of that, and the resulting priorities that come out of strategic planning session will be connected to and added to this. That is something that we find that happens when we have what we currently score as low priorities. Sometimes they never make it to medium or high priorities because new emergent issues come in, and council will see them as a higher priority. That's completely fine. That's just natural. Circumstance can change. Community feedback can help us see things a little differently. And so as long as I think that this is a living process and something that council is connected to, that allows us to be both organized but also to be responsive.
Okay. Councillor Sorensen.
Through the chair to administration, I'm glad you brought up the fact that some of these are directly linked and that they might be more efficient to do at the same time, because I made a note that the neighborhood parks plan, it would make a lot of sense to do that at the exact same time as the landscape green spaces analysis in town. I think that all should be done at once in conjunction.
Yeah, thank you.
Exactly.
I think, and at minimum, I think considered as we can, as we go through them, and so, we're administratively again. It's been a good exercise for us to do this. This last piece of the rankings or the prioritization, I think will be very helpful.
Okay. Councillor Chenard.
I'm actually pleased the way this was. I was having computer trouble, so thank you, Kayla, for helping me through this. But looking at the red high priorities, like some will have financial impacts, but a lot of them don't. Have we planned anywhere in the budget for some of the high priority ones that are going to cost money? Have we budgeted in to make these happen in the near future?
Thank you. It depends, if I may, on the item. Some of them only require staff time and research and reporting to council, at least the initial stages. It's usually through that initial process that we would come back to council and then say, based on council's discretion of how they would engage a certain activity, that then they would have to resource it through a budgetary process. And where possible that we can accomplish it within existing budgets, we obviously would, but there would be times where it would need to be resourced if it wasn't.
Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay, well, thank you very much for bringing this forward. I think we're all very pleased with being able to see it and view it. We will move forward to council remuneration review, and I believe our HR manager, Colin McComb, will be presenting that.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you. As you're aware, the administration sourced an HR consultant, Ed Gross from HR Outlook, to examine our current salary placements in terms of both council and out-of-scope salary. We did that in 2019 and presented the results of that, or had Ed present the results of that on January 14th. Where we are sitting now in respect to council is that council and mayoral salaries are hanging out around the 25th percentile. The mayor's salary is just below that, councillor salaries are just above. What the administration seeks with this document is policy direction to amend the council remuneration policy, to set percentile targets for compensation, to set a schedule for external I hate this word, remuneration reviews. It should be remuneration reviews, and to apply annual market increases to keep pace with inflation between reviews. The document in front of you outlines 4 options, one of which is the status quo. One is the 50th percentile, which we're calling comparative. One is the 65th percentile, which we're calling moderately competitive, and the 75th percentile, which we're calling competitive. The document also outlines the annual cost implications for reaching each of these targets.
Okay, thank you, Colin, for that. We'll open the floor to questions. Councillor Schnard?
Yes, thank you for doing this. My view is on it, we should accept it for information and review it when we would normally review it, because we did a review in 2019, when they changed the tax rules, and we gave ourselves an increase for that. I do like information, it's not wasted, but we should review it like a year from now, because a lot of times you vote on the raise for the next council. So I do appreciate the work, I like the facts and figures, but that's how I feel about it.
Okay. Anybody else? Councillor Sorensen?
The previous council failed to do that, so now we're left with a tough decision in making a correction. This policy, or these rates haven't been adjusted in 6 years, and because of that, we're one of the lowest. We have the lowest rates in our peers. I used to teach statistics at the University of Alberta, and I know how hard it is to educate, or for educated adults to understand percentiles. And because of that, I'm recommending that we proceed forward with mean average to correct the remuneration for 3 reasons. It's slightly more competitive than the 50th percentile. It is easier to explain to the public and justify. And thirdly, it almost perfectly matches what we have budgeted in the 2020 budget. Like I said, this policy has been neglected for 6 years, and I think we should proceed with this adjustment to the mean average effective February 1st, 2020. I agree with the recommendation that moving forward we should strive for that 50th percentile, and that we should be using annual adjustments, either positive or negative, to keep the rate realistic. I also agree with the external market review every 4 years, and I suggest that would start in 2025. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Sorensen. Councillor Curry?
Through the chair, and just to Colin, I'm sorry, I know he just presented to us. Can you remind me, what is the norm within policy? So is the norm within the HR policy that looking at the consumer price index, is that typically already in the policy, so it's just kind of as stated in most remuneration with the councils? Do most councils have that in policy saying that yes, every year they will follow that? Or is it brought kind of on every year it's changed based on what the council thinks?
Through the chair, I would need to, I have the policies. We
Okay.
solicited those. I would have to go through them to look specifically. I would imagine that it varies considerably.
Mhm.
If I may add to that, I think that the purpose of a cost of living adjustment is that it would just reflect keeping whatever the pay rate is in line with inflation. And typically, if you take that approach, then it doesn't require any other action. You just identify the index that you're connecting it with, and then that would just automatically be applied in any given year. As Colin said, I'm not familiar with what other councils done, but in typical compensation approaches, that would be an approach similar to like our collective agreement or other types of compensation instruments.
Okay. Councillor Chenard?
Just to, on a comment that I heard, the previous council did not neglect to give herself a raise. If you go back, we did some changes that were equivalent to a raise. So it wasn't that we did not, we just felt at the time because of the changes, it wasn't warranted. So I agree, we need to look at it, but that's a good comment, Jason.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, also to Councillor Sorensen, sorry. I was on the last council, and at that time, we were paid per meeting that we attended with a very base rate, and we all voted to be paid on a monthly rate, so it was a total different thing. It wasn't that we didn't change it for 7 years and have been neglectful. Also, I do understand medium and mean and all those other things. I also understand that on my pension this year, for my cost of living allowance, I got 1.2%. So.
Okay. Councillor Bevan?
Through the chair, I also agree with Councillor Chenard here. I think, we should receive this for information. We look at it 2021. And Councillor Wilkinson was right in what we did on previous council, 100% in that. I don't see why we have to be close to what our peers are. I look at the town as a whole of what we do. Our duties have not increased in any way, shape, or form. We go to AMA, FCM, and everything else. We get paid for everything, and I mean everything. So the only time you lose any money from not being on council, whatever, is if you spend something out of your own pocket. That's the only time you use. So we get compensated fairly well for what we do in that. And when you run for election, you know what you're going to be getting here right now. So 2021 comes up, we can talk about it and set it for the next 4 years. I agree that we just received this for information. I'm not in any type of favor for an increase at all in this term.
Councillor Sorensen?
This, through the chair to council, if this was any other organization we were talking about, whether a non-profit group or a group of employees or even a for-profit group that was being underpaid or unfairly treated in our community, we would immediately rectify the situation and without hesitation. So the only reason that we would postpone rectifying the situation is for political reasons, and I'm not willing to do that.
Okay. Councillor Wilkinson?
Sorry, none of these are for political reasons. When I ran for council, I knew exactly what I was going to be paid, and I am quite happy with that. And if you're worried about people in the community not getting a fair shake, I don't think doctors, nurses, teachers are getting a fair shake. Are we rectifying that when they get 0% this year? Because that is what our economy is indicating right now, that there isn't extra money.
Okay. I've got two questions to administration. First one is, what are the amounts that we have budgeted for in the budget? And I believe there were 2 different line items for them. Can you review that for us, please?
Yeah. Thank you. The amount that's currently budgeted for potential adjustment to council remuneration is $50,000.
Okay. And second question is, when Ed Gross did the presentation, he also mentioned review on the out-of-scope staff. I know it's not in this meeting, but is that going to be brought forward at a later date?
Yes, that's the plan.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Curry?
Through the chair. So in Ed's presentation, he also mentioned that one of the main reasons that we're not at status quo was that we're the only council that doesn't get benefits. And I think when we're talking about a diverse council, that plays a huge role in the difference. And so I was just wondering, could we see something about benefits? So instead of looking at the raise, the difference if we were to get benefits and kind of how that goes, because he had just mentioned that that is one thing that does differentiate us.
Through the chair, yes, that certainly is a possibility. I have been in contact with our insurance company just to get some rough numbers to that effect. You would likely be looking at between $4,000 or $5,000 a year. So what Ed did was compare you to the total compensation, and there's several ways. If you wanted to say we want to be competitive at that total compensation rate or comparable at 50%, there are different ways you could go about that. One of them to be, let's just bring our base wage up to that and do what we currently do, which is allow counselors the option to opt in at full price to themselves, or incorporate that into the cost and have that reflected, have the base compensation brought down to reflect that amount. It's really a matter of your preference.
Just,
Okay.
if I may, just one thing I may add to that is, for council's consideration is if benefits were to be considered as part of the compensation, which they should be in terms of the total package, I think as Councillor Curry suggested, that we often end up with diverse groups who are our council. So to me, allowing for someone to select whether or not they would participate in benefits is probably the best dynamic, because then those who would benefit most from the benefits, there's a lot of benefits in that sentence, can choose that, and others who may have already benefits through other employment or through a partner's employment can receive that compensation in a different model. And so that's just something I offer for council's consideration.
Okay. Any other comments? Mayor Zahara?
Thank you. Interesting discussion. It's never comfortable talking about your own pay. I fundamentally don't believe politicians should be setting their own pay. But we are, as I've said previously, way under where comparable municipalities are. Councillor Wilkinson made a comment that it was adjusted and some of the other incumbents, and that's absolutely correct. I served on council when we were getting paid per meeting rate, and we had councillors that were at or nearly close to what the mayor was getting paid just based on their committee structure. So went to a salary. To be honest, when that decision was made, I didn't really agree with it, but now that I've been here and seen, I think it's a lot better in terms of budgeting, and I think it levels the playing field. But I do take issue with the comments we get paid for everything we do. Because some people don't attend AUMA, but you get paid the same amount. You may have less committee work, you get paid the same amount. So I think we need to reflect on that. Some members of council may choose to go to more sessions, more educational sessions. They don't get paid more for that. And some may go to less, and they don't get paid any less for that. So I think it's really important that we get this right. I think that we need to take the politics out of it. That's why I like the annual increases and a policy review every 4 years. I've stated before, I knew what I was getting paid when I ran, so I'm comfortable with that. As for the implementation date, interested to see where council sits on that. I think that we do need to adjust this, and we should do it now, whether that's for this term or for the next term. That's a different debate, but we've opened this box, and let's get this right moving forward. I do have a bit of an issue through to administration comparing 2019 numbers to 2018 numbers. We did do, as Councillor Chenard stated, a review in terms of the tax implications. We did not do an overall review. We don't know what the other councils did for 2019. So their numbers could be up, their numbers could be the same. I know a number of municipalities have taken the same action that we did, is to ensure that the take-home pay is the same, but nobody actually got a physical increase. So that's kind of where I'm at on that.
Okay, Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, I'd like to just add one final thing. When we did change to being compensated for the meetings we went to, there was concern that, if you're not being paid per meeting, people won't attend the meetings that they're assigned to, and I can proudly say I think that has never happened at this council. We all do attend our meetings. And I also must say that I think our mayor is grossly underpaid because he has letters to write, he is on at all times. The rest of us have our committees, you have everything. So I do think you are grossly underpaid.
Mayor Zahara?
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Byron, and to Councilor Wilkinson. I have that same concern because if you're not incentivized to go to a meeting, why would you go? You can get by. And I have to say, with this group, I've seen everybody goes to everything and goes to events, things we're not paid to. I know that some of our municipal colleagues in other jurisdictions, they go if they get paid, and they don't go if they don't get paid. So I think that's kudos to this group. As for my position, I can tell you I ran knowing what the pay was. Being on council, I thought I had a good idea what this position includes. But it's a lot more work than I anticipated, and it has changed since I first got onto council with social media. I get contacted every single day with issues and stuff. So, but having said that, like I said, I know what I'm getting paid, and I'm happy to delay this for the incoming council. But I think the benefits question is a good one. I think that would help for diversity. I know for myself personally, with a family, that would help me personally and help others hopefully to run for council in the future. And maybe it's not such a big financial impact in the interim. We could also look at staging this over a 3-year period to get to where we need to get to. But I'm glad we're having the discussion. I think this is an important discussion to have. And I think that politicians on all levels, whether it's municipal, provincial, or federal, have to put up with a lot more today than they had to do just even 5 years ago. So, and there's impacts. It takes away from your family, it takes away from your personal lives, and it takes away from if you have a business or you work. It certainly, or retired, it certainly impacts you. So.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Curry?
I would agree with the mayor in the sense that I do think we need to make the decision, and I'd be comfortable with pushing that decision to the voting, but knowing the date. Same thing, I was elected knowing what we were making. I would, and I know I'll vote against it, but I agree with you, Councillor Wilkinson. I think that our mayor's is not acceptable. I think also when you look at 218, because just knowing what I looked at myself, most councils did increase for the tax. So to be clear, our take home didn't change, our taxes changed, so we didn't get a salary increase. And looking at that, knowing that our mayor is at the 0 percentile, and we all know how much he works, and so that I would like to see earlier, but I would not only the benefits, I would like the benefits and the idea of childcare that we've discussed before, that I think kind of plays into that same concept.
Okay. My comments are, I also believe the mayor is extremely underpaid. Out of all the peers that were there, he was the lowest, and I think the comment that was made about the social media, I think we can all relate to that, being on it and getting questions on that, and kind of when you share information on there, you also open yourself up for discussion that maybe you didn't always think was there. I knew what we were paid when we started on this, but my question, I guess, to the rest of council is, why did we vote it in the budget if we're not willing to make any changes right now? I think it's a bit of irony there. I've thought all along that it should be something that should be phased in. I don't think having that jump is necessary. I guess it's just a timing on when that happens is my concern. But whether we do the mayor at a different rate than the council, I don't know. But I think if we want to have quality people choose to run in the election, I think that we have to understand what that compensation looks like. And right now for the mayor, I think that now that we've made it publicized that our mayor is the lowest paid, it doesn't make it very competitive or encourage anybody to run for it. So I really, really think that we need to make some changes to this. Mayor Zahara?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bauer. To be clear, looking at some of the numbers, I don't think mayors in our size of community making like $80,000 a year is acceptable either. I think that, and I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but I think there has to be that medium there. I like targeting either the median or the 50th percentile. I think that is an appropriate way to go, and that way it gets adjusted accordingly. And I think that we've seen a lack of mayoral candidates over the years. People ask me if I'm crazy for running. But we also want to ensure that those that are running are not doing it for the money either. So that they're doing it because they want to do, they have ideas for the community, they have a vision for the community. So finding that appropriate balance, I think, is important. And I'd be supportive of moving to the 50th percentile and starting as soon as this year and phasing it in to get to that 50th percentile for 2022. Is that when the next election is? 2021, 2022. So for 2022, we'd be at that 50th percentile with those annual cost of living increases or decreases, whatever that looks like.
Councillor Chenard?
I like what I'm hearing in the room. It's great dialogue on it. For the questioning budget, there's no harm in, if we're shooting for 2021 to go into it, we can start budgeting it in. The money can sit there. So we can slowly going, so then, and I like the other comment, let's get it right. So we're talking about it now, there's lots of time. So let's get it right. There's no harm in budgeting in for it. So when we hit 2021, what I'm in favor of, when the new council, when we, because I agree, looking at the numbers, the mayor is seriously underpaid in comparison. I also like to comment, a town, we shouldn't be at 80,000, I agree. But it's gotta be marginal. The other thing that we did discuss, and now is there, that we had discussed it about deputy mayor. So during your time as deputy mayor, we need to review that and pay that person more money, and it all rotates. So for 4 months, because by chairing committee of the whole and signing, when we look at what the mayor does as deputy mayor, you're also doing some extra work. So for that time period, we don't have to guarantee it, but we should review that, because we are taking some of the workload off the mayor during that, because even example, chairing the meetings. So we have lots of time. We should bring this back in May to our planning session, discuss it, let's get it right, but let's budget it in so it's not a shock in 2021. And because then even the comment where they're saying other people, well, with our economy right now, political or not, morally it would be the right thing to do. Companies are taking rollbacks. So even if you went and said, hey, it's 20% increase, it's not really a lot of money, but it's the optics of it, of the person that just got a 10% decrease. They don't look what their 10% versus where we're at, because if you do 10%, that's $230 a month, but their 10% could be $2,000 a month. So we need to get it right. We need to budget it in, so when we hit 2020, we're good. So let's talk about it in May, and let's review the mayor at 0. I agree, should get paid more. Council, we need to keep up and look at the deputy mayor and move forward, and yes, budget it in.
Okay, CO Derricott.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, when the current model of a salary compensation versus a per diem was adopted, it included consideration for deputy mayor that was incorporated into the council rates as part of that process. So consideration has already been given.
Councillor Sorensen?
I'm not in favor of delaying this to May. I believe we have all the information in front of us right now. I don't think this deserves closed door discussion. We have all the information. This discussion should occur in the public, and I'm in favor of that.
Councillor Sorensen?
What?
Or sorry, Councillor Chenard?
When we discuss it at committee of the whole, we can openly talk, but I agree, our findings should be public. So what we discussed and what we come back to, is just that we're discussing it. Who knows how much time we spend time on now, but I agree, we'll talk about it, and our findings, yes, we should bring it back public. And if it's will of council, then we'll put it to a vote. So, I mean, that's I'm not doing anything secretly, but I mean, I agree with the mayor's comment. We should not be deciding our wages. To me, that makes zero sense. And in all levels of government, so we're all in a bad spot, political or not, we are deciding what we get paid. If we were a private company, privately owned, then I agree, but because we're public money, we should not be deciding what we get paid. We can send it review, and that's where when you send it to the next council, then we have told the public what we're doing. They choose if they agree or disagree.
Okay, CO Derricotte?
Yeah, thank you. If I may, I sympathize with council in this situation. This is at minimum awkward situation to be in. But at the end of the day, every single governing body does decide what they get paid. Mm-hmm. They vote on budgets, and they vote on policy. There are mechanisms that are put in place to depoliticize this process specifically. For example, this is why council, in their wisdom, directed administration to use a third-party consultant to bring back a professional report for which council consider that is completely neutral, and so that they can inform council's decision and try to make what is awkward less awkward. But regardless of the mechanism that council chooses, whether some municipalities have a citizens committee that reviews it and makes a recommendation, ultimately this body has to adopt and pass whatever that mechanism is. So I just don't want that to be lost. There's no way out of, unfortunately, I wish there was, but there's no way out of that ultimate responsibility lying with council to deal with this dynamic. Administration is certainly happy and has tried to place this information in front of council in a way that it can be dealt with as I think openly and as delicately as possible. But even if that decision is now or May or next year or for the next council, this body being the council ultimately will at some point have to make that determination, and administration will just follow direction on what next steps council would like to see.
Okay. Councillor Wilkinson?
For the next step, I would like to see what a package would be. Like, many of us have coverage already, but I think that's a good incentive for people, like the mayor was saying, it would help his family out to have a healthcare package, whatever.
Councillor Sorensen?
I do agree with the comment, or through the chair, sorry, I do agree with the comment of having those benefits opt-in or opt-in option. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay. So to council, we're not moving very quickly on this, and it is awkward and uncomfortable to talk about, no doubt. I have heard a couple comments around the table about phasing it in, and that phased in portion goes to the option 2, which, if happened all at once, would be $25,800. A few comments were made about phasing it in over 3 years. I'm not sure if that makes sense to do that way, but if we did it that way, some quick math is that's between $8,000 or $9,000 that would affect the budget that we've already passed, that we've approved for $50,000, but we'd only be using $8,000 or $9,000 of it. That's correct. Okay, so we would have $42,000-ish ballpark to not spare, but that we would be using. Reallocate. Thank you. I'm going to just put forward as a suggestion to this council if that is something that they're interested in moving forward, so we can give administration information to proceed.
You're just going to go around the table?
Sure. Mayor Zahara. So just to be clear, so that's phasing it in over 3 years. I've heard that comment to that option 2, which is the comparative 50th percentile mark. And it's about $8,000 to $9,000 per year increase as a total. Okay, so Mayor Zahara?
Before he goes, can I say something?
Of course.
Do you mind? I would support a 2-year phase. I don't understand why we would push this to the next council. That's just passing the buck. It's just delaying your decision, and we're mandated to make this decision. And I would support a 2-year phase in before the end of our term. I still don't understand why we would phase it in. If it was a non-profit organization that was being treated unfairly, we would fix the problem right now. we wouldn't phase it in over 2 years.
Mhm.
But in cooperation with council to find some kind of agreement today, I could agree to a 2-year phase-in, so if someone wants to speak in.
Okay,
Starts
so,
over there.
so a 2-year phase-in is about 12,500 per year ballpark, so. Mayor Zahara?
So, having listened to all the comments, and I struggle with this because I really don't like voting on my own salary. What I personally would like to see is this year benefits. We all get benefits or choice to opt into those benefits or not opt in. And then phase in half of that salary increase for 2021. And then for 2022, there would be a full phase in. So starting January 1st, 2022, that full phase in would be there. And over the course of those years, there would be that fluctuation with the cost of living increase.
Okay.
I'd like to echo our mayor. I totally agree with that, with the benefit package looked into first. If that takes a portion of this, it will take a portion of the money.
Mayor Zahara?
And if I could just say it, I think that for us to get benefits, I think people understand that, and I think it's not as a big impact to our budget. We already have money allocated in there, and depending on what those programs look like, there may be a contribution side from us as well. So if we choose to opt in, great. If not, then we can choose not to. But I think you may have skipped over Councillor
Okay,
Swenson.
Councillor Swenson?
With regards to that recommendation, I could support that.
Okay. And Councillor Wilkinson agree? I also agree with that.
I
Councillor
agree
Shamar?
with the benefits, but not start phasing until 2022, January 1st. But I do agree with the benefits. That's something that would be a benefit to those that need
Okay.
that program.
Thank you. Councillor Curry?
I agree with what the mayor said, and I agree with the phase in at 2021, because I think it's easier on the operating budget when we're talking taxes and such, and it's not all at once.
Okay. Councillor Bevan?
Yeah, I also agree, and I had my target for 2021 too, but you just put a little different way on the spin on it. So I thought of 2021 also, as that is our last year of our council. It comes into a new council, and that's what we done in previous council. We did look at the last year we put it in, and fortunately it wasn't there, so I agree.
Okay. Mayor Zahara?
I just want to clarify that the 2021, we're still going to be in council that year, so there'll be half of that
Yes.
increase would be
Half
coming
the
that year,
increase, yeah.
and the full increase would be coming for the incoming council. So,
Yes.
so there'll be just a
9
slight
months.
increase.
Yeah.
Okay. Administration, do you guys have enough information to proceed?
Colin, are you comfortable? I think if I can recap, it would be to consider addition of benefits or equivalent compensation this year, then a phased-in approach to the remainder of 2 years. So if I was to simplify that as much as I possibly could, we're basically talking about a 3-year phased-in approach with a target of the 50th percentile.
Yes.
I agree.
With the annual increments as well.
We will certainly consider in the policy cost of living as well.
Councillor Curry?
Yeah, I was just gonna add that through the chair, and I would like to see a policy, kind of within the next year passed with that in there.
Thank you. I think our intent would be to return a policy to council relatively soon.
Okay. All right,
Thank you.
I just wanted to thank council for the discussion.
job.
It's easy to have this out of camera, or sorry, in camera, not out of camera. Yes, Councillor Mayor Zahara.
Through the chair, I just want to congratulate council on finding a compromise and a solution to address the problem. This was not easy, and I know we have very different views on how this should look like, so I think we did a really good job.
Getting pretty good at that.
Yeah. 2 years in. So, okay. So with that being said, we will move forward to infrastructure and planning. We've got our snow and ice policy amendment, and I believe Sam Shine, our transportation manager, will be presenting that tonight.
Good evening. Yeah, so we had a review of the current snow and ice control policies. There's 3 policies and a procedure that's currently in place. Review of those policies showed they were lacking. Information was required to better set the parameters that govern snow and ice controlled operations. We did bring this forward in October to the committee. We've made some changes, reviewed other municipalities, collected some data, that type of stuff, made some amendments for you guys to review.
Okay. Thank you, Sam.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Sam, were you going to go over the maps in a little detail, or?
They're just really, they're not part of the policy. They're just there to give you to accompany it, to give you an idea of what the operational side would look like. That's all.
Okay.
Fire
Did you have any more, Sam?
Not at the moment.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I just saw the papers. All right. Open the floor to questions.
I think
it was.
Council can go first.
Okay. Councillor Curry, or sorry, Councillor Chenard.
It was actually Councillor.
Excuse me, I think, Madam Chair,
Yes.
how would you like this to proceed?
You're the boss.
You are the boss.
Okay, we'll go with Councillor Swanson.
All right, through the chair to administration, with regards to statement of value number 6, I have no issue with the CAO having a small pot of $50,000 for large snow events, is what I would call them. My concern is calling it a snow emergency, because we have an emergency management committee that handles emergency events and has its own budgetary process and its own responses and its own there's a whole, I mean, it's going to be a huge document. So I'm hoping that we can rename this some other like large-scale snow event or something. I'm just worried about calling this an emergency, and when someone says, "Where's your emergency plan to deal with this?" I'm going to give them a big binder, and really it's just a quick and easy decision by the
Thank
CEO.
you.
Erica?
If I may respond to that. No, I think the point is well made, because it may not be an emergency event at all. It just may be a number of regular events, but many of them over the course of a period of time. I think the intent there is that council has set aside a snow removal reserve,
Right.
and just that the CAO would have at their discretion the ability to access that as needed, up to $50,000 at their discretion. So there could be any number of circumstances that would precipitate that access. And so with that feedback, I think we can tidy that language a little bit to reflect that. Yeah, the intent isn't necessarily to limit that. I think we just want to provide the flexibility to ensure that service can happen in a timely manner.
Councillor Chenard?
Oh, okay, well, thank you for doing the report. I have am I allowed to do more than one?
2 is okay.
Okay, 2. Part of it was for the snow event, the snowfall accumulating to 5 centimeters. What I found in the past is you guys got a plan, you're going away, you're hauling snow, you're carrying on, and all of a sudden we get 6 centimeters of snow, which because there's already snow on the ground, it's not as much an emergency unless it's October. So in that case, then you stop hauling and it interrupts. It's not your fault that it snowed 4 times in a week. But I'm just wondering how we could address that, like when you would say the 5 centimeters is bad or not bad.
Yeah, so obviously the threshold there, and the reason for going back and restarting the priorities is to accommodate the emergency services, making sure that they have access to each residential zone for emergency events. So even though, sure, other roads are going to have deeper snow on it, it's a priority, a high priority to make sure that they're able to respond in a timely manner. The other aspect to it is that at the bottom it does say that in certain events the policy we may have to deviate, and certainly earlier in this season we had to do that. You know, it kept snowing and snowing, but other roads were getting impassable, and we had to say, you know what, we can't go back and redo the priorities. We're going to have to continue on and finish residentials and whatnot. There's a discretion based on each individual event or occurrence. It's not impossible to plan in advance for every occurrence.
And then my second
Yeah.
part, what is your policy on the town-owned buildings? So I mean, like town office, medical center, the museum, and the library. What, do we have a policy in place for that?
Yeah,
Where
we
do
have
they fit?
those fitting under the high traffic areas, so facility car parks fit under the high traffic areas. So it would come after our commercial zone before residential.
Okay, because the one that I have the issue with, and I addressed it, and they told me it's for time, in front of the library would be 8th Avenue, 7th Avenue, right up to the sidewalk. And a lot of times, so I'm just, and the reason is because of snow and ice being backed up. So when we're doing 48, is it possible to add it in that we can run the grader, and it's very important to keep the snow to the pavement. If you maybe get 2-3 inches, it builds up ice and it backs up on the sidewalk. So if we could add that to, when doing 48, the grader just simply turns the snow, they can blade it towards Kinsman Park where the parking is.
Yeah.
Because there where the concern is to make it accessible for wheelchair. There is a wheelchair access in the back, but unfortunately the only way to get there is a back alley, and we know our back alley policy. So I'd just like to, if we can add that.
It's already
Yeah,
in
I
there.
think it's added on
It's
there.
in.
Yeah.
Oh, it was added in, but I just noticed, and the reason I noticed it, because I went to the library and I got stuck. And I
Yeah.
thought, what's going on? So I'm just, for safety concern and accessibility, I'm just wondering if we could put it in a higher priority, because during the snowfall, we do clean the medical center, we clean by the town office.
So
And
in order to move up priority, we'd have to, the idea is it would meet the criteria set in the priority 1, 2 and commercial zones.
okay, so
So
how would we,
if it doesn't meet the criteria, it'd stay in the high traffic area.
okay, but how would we make it meet criteria, because it is for public access?
If I may.
Yeah.
So if you look in your document there, you have priority 1, priority 2, commercial zone routes. As soon as those commercial zone routes, the high traffic areas will be done, and that's when the library will be done. So
Okay,
it'll
but-
be done way before the residential, which was the issue this year. So this would be done within a few days of a snow event,
Okay.
based on this map. So before we'll be done with the residential, that has now moved up. So when 10th Avenue gets done, when the facilities get done, the area in front of the library, that loop will get done.
Okay, the only reason I bring it up because it was a problem, not pointing
Yeah.
fingers, might have got forgotten, but it was a problem. So I'm trying to, now's my time, and I'd like to put a priority up because it's saying high traffic. It's not necessarily a high traffic area, but it is accessibility, same as where our medical center across where we clean it so people can access it. So that's my opportunity to bring it up, I'm bringing it up.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Councillor Curry? Yeah, Councillor Curry.
Through the chair. I just, going back to number 6, I was just curious, and I know it does say in the beginning there of the winter season, but I was wondering if it should have annual under the chief administrative officers authorized to release amounts not exceeding 50,000 annually when necessary. Not that I think that you're going to be releasing repeatedly 50,000, but I do think that that leaves it open, that does not specify that that's per annual, and if we're looking at 100,000, 150,000 per year, that's a substantial difference.
So,
Thank you
Derek?
to the chair. I think this may be wise based on some of the memes I've seen on the internet. Winter is forever in Canada, so that may be a problem. But
Yeah, just that one annual, and then just, am I allowed to? Yes.
Yes, yeah.
With number 9, and same thing, this is just wording, so I may be just being nitpicky here. I was just with that ice control will be considered redundant once snow accumulates beyond a depth of 5 centimeters. Is that per, like, snow incident?
Yeah, basically, our sand material is pickled with salt. If we drop it on snow deeper than 5 centimeters, it turns into a slush, starts turning into a slush, then refreezes, and the condition worsens. It doesn't improve traction. So we don't perform ice removal or, de-icing or anti-icing service. We actually provide a traction control service. That's what we're looking to achieve. So if we put it on snow deeper than 5 centimeters, we make a bigger mess, not improve conditions. That's what that's about. So yeah, if it's too deep, we'll make a mess by putting it on.
So just to clarify, we'll clear the snow before we begin sanding those
Yeah.
roads again.
Okay.
We'll stand right behind the clearing operations, not ahead.
Okay, so just to further Councillor Curry's question on that, With the 5 centimeters. So what about when we have the snow events of 5 centimeters or greater, and then we have those intersections that maybe aren't in the top 2 or 3 pages maps here, and then they start to get icy. So is the intention that you would, now that it's packed down, now it's not fluffy anymore, is the intention to provide that traction control at those intersections?
Yeah, and so the 5 centimeters is fresh fall. Once it gets compacted, it's no longer 5 centimeters.
Okay. Okay.
1 or 2.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Bevan?
That's through the chair. When we have our equipment breakdown on that, do we have any other backup? Like, do we have any contractors, if they're available, that we can use to help us, you know, pick up our snow? Because I know sometimes we've broken down, we just got out to broken down, and then it's been a whole day before we moved any snow until we got parts or whatever that.
We certainly do. The expense of those contractors is extremely high, and so we have to try and manage that when the budget's set. So we can only perform those practices to a certain extent.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilkinson first.
Through the chair, thanks for the report. I guess Councillor Sorensen helped me find out that our Main Street is just our first commercial, and I guess that's when you start. So I had people complaining to me, they said, how do you expect us to shop locally when we can't even park? And I just find, like, historically, it seemed to be that in the night, that Main Street would be cleaned, one of the first things off, and people could park down there. And now, it is a real mess. Like, I drive a car and I could easily be stuck down there most days. So is there any way that we can change things so that that Main Street at least is just done up, back and forth?
Sorry.
When there's no cars parked, like the first thing out in the morning?
So Main Street is done after the priority routes.
I know.
And that was always, I believe that's always been the case.
Yeah, and a priority,
are we talking about just the northern end of the street, or are we talking about the entire downtown section?
I think just downtown, so people could park there actually, so that we do help the downtown merchants. And I know you have to do the emergency routes, but like in front of my place is an emergency route, and it's scraped right down to the pavement all the time. So I just think, does it need to be that low all the time, or could you diversify out a little further? And the same with the traction onto the highway. Like, so many people are complaining about sliding onto the highway. So if the roads aren't cleaned and we're not sanding, and we know that there's slopes down to the highway, somehow I would hope things could change a bit.
And Madam Chairman, Councillor Wilkinson, we provide the service within the budget that we have, but that's extremely operational, and to provide direction now towards what is a theoretical example of the weather, I'm not sure that I would feel confident that we want to detract from the schools and the hospitals and the access of ambulance. But again, you could change certain commercial areas to be added to priorities if that's what you want.
Well, I think Councillor Schnack was referring to this about how often do those priority routes have to be done. Like, when they're right scraped down and say on 9th, people in a 4x4 are getting stuck because the road never got cleaned. I guess it's just how clean do the emergency routes have to be? I guess that's my only question.
Okay, Mayor Zahara.
Thank you, Councillor Byron. I think you make up some good points, Councillor Wilkinson. I think we've done this year really stellar job compared to what I've seen over the years, over the course of the years. I used to live on 6th Avenue, and the grader was by my house like every second day, and I'm going, why does it need to go by my house? I think our staff have really tried to manage that well, and I know that they didn't go back to priority routes a couple times this season already to finish up some of those other areas. I've also heard from people in the commercial district that this year's snow removal has been stellar compared to last year because it is getting done quicker. It was never really a priority. It kind of got done a couple days after so everybody can push their snow into the streets. So if we focus our crews in one area, then it's just going to delay in other areas. So I think finding that balance once again is going to be important unless we want to increase our budget. I'm happy to see that we the number 6 in this to allow the CAO to release monies, because before it would have to come to council. When you're in the middle of a snow event like we've seen this year, it's really hard to do. I would say to administration and in this document, I think that we should not be afraid to access that reserve. That money is there and we want to provide that level of service. especially if we're having equipment failures and that sort of thing, which we've seen this season. One of the things council may want to consider, but you'd have to put the budget towards it, is hiring contractors to do the downtown core at nighttime. But that would be just an increase to our operational budget, and I don't know if we want to do that or not. Because I think we do provide stellar snow service in our community based on the amount of snow we get. People like to compare us to other communities. They don't get the snow that we get here in Edson. We get dumped on continually. Our residentials are getting done for the second time already, and probably will maybe even get done 3 times this year. So that's a lot more than some of the other communities out there. So I'm really happy with this document. The only comment I would have, sorry, I'm kind of digressing here, but when we're doing 50th Street, I think we should just continue up until 13th Avenue. The crews are already working there. People don't understand where the commercial district starts and doesn't. I had arguments with people, well, you could have went to block east or west and had a clear road, so why are you driving down 50th? But I think it makes a lot of sense just to get that street done while you're on the southern end and just continue going. That's just, that'll let the operations folks figure that out, but that's just a comment.
Yeah, and my comments are, I appreciate some of the changes that were made. I see that 10th Ave was included, and Mayor Zahara said the comment that I was going to say about continuing on Main Street. It is a main road that people use to access downtown and to get across the highway sometimes, because you can with the lights. It's a guarantee eventually. So I think that would be one that I would want kind of boosted up somewhere in the priority from where it currently is. So. Councillor Chenard?
Just a comment and a question. Comment, you guys did a fine job because I understand snow removal and no one can plan. So I mean, overall this winter there was complaints, but I'd have to echo in the room, you guys are doing a fine job. My question is, and I don't think it's in a document, we used to have an extra budget set aside. A lot of time it was carryover. How much money do we have in budget? Because like some years, we get no snow at all, and other years we can get dumped on for 3-4 months, and then there is a comment that you're allowed 50,000, but if you get a horrible snow year, that may go to 200,000. We'll do that 4 times. So how much do we have in the extra budget for that?
Madam Chairman, through to Councillor Chouinard, we don't actually have a carryover budget, but there is an operational reserve for snow-related practices. The total that we keep in there right now is around 300,000. I think we've accessed it only a couple times, and what time was this past 2019?
And that's the reason I'm asking, because we do have the CEO's authority, which I totally agree with. We don't want to come back to council, but if we have that, because we've had some years that are absolutely horrendous. You're not even a quarter way done cleaning, it snows again, and pretty soon people are complaining, carrying on, but in 2 weeks, we've had 2 feet of snow. What do you want us to do? You guys are doing a fine job. So even where we're echoing, we're just saying snow emergency in some of the cases, you get too much snow, and we have great equipment. At that time, we can access to say, you know what, these emergency roads are not getting cleaned. Yes, contractors are expensive. We may have to call on a grader because, and you don't want it to happen every day, but if it does happen, we can call on a contractor to say, hey, you know what, you gotta help us. We do have the funds.
If I may, just add, add a few thoughts to this. I think just to ensure that the policy's intent is really clear, and I think there's been some great feedback and some great conversation. Snow removal's main purpose is to allow access for service provision, in particular emergency service provision, fire, ambulance, police response. That is the main purpose of snow removal. The fact that people really, really like it because it makes it easy to get to work and all those types of things are obviously important and they matter, but I think the frame of reference needs to be maintained that is the key focus on the snow removal activities, and it answers a little bit of the questions of why do we continually go back to the priority routes is because we got to open up those areas so first of all, emergency responders, but then school buses and kind of, those key elements can take place. That doesn't take away from any of the conversation. I just think that frame of reference adds a little bit of context to why the policy is constructed the way it is, and allows us to administratively take an approach as to the guiding principles under which we apply the policy.
Okay. Councillor Schnor, do you have anything new to add?
Nothing new. I have something new to add, and I can't find it on the map. But with the closing of Evergreen School, where there was complaints, is the seniors lodge, or those two senior apartments that are on Fifth Avenue and 40.
Heritage Court.
Yeah. Now, because there is seniors there, and I don't know if it's on the map, but that's what sparked it during emergency, because there is a dense population of seniors, that we could maybe add it, because when Evergreen closed, it used to be good. And I've seen they've had trouble there with the seniors bus, but in case of emergency, an ambulance would not be able to get down there if needed.
So I've had throughout the season a
That's
lot
Fifth
of phone calls from all sorts of different seniors lodges and seniors that live in their own houses. They're scattered all over town. For us to prioritise one senior lodge over another, while trying to accommodate all of them, would pretty much end up with us clearing the majority of the residential zone. So yeah, it's an extremely nice idea, and I would love to be able to accomplish it, facilitate it, but it'd be very difficult.
Okay. Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair to Mr. Shine. There's only 3 senior lodges in town.
Yeah.
And the senior bus couldn't even get down to Heatherwood Manor there. So that seems that maybe a little less scraping down and a little more spread out would be nice, because it is hard for them to be stuck there.
Sorry, some official lodges, some are unofficial, and they
Well,
just have high
There's 3 that
residency.
Evergreen Foundation have.
That's official.
They're official.
Mayor Zahara?
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Well, maybe that's the thing. Maybe we say that Evergreen Foundation ran multi-family seniors lodges are considered. I seen that, and I think we also have to keep in mind that was an extreme situation where we had a couple snow dumps, and I think maybe just from an operational point of view, I think our director of transportation just needs to look at those and make some judgment calls. Personally, I would have liked to seen that cleared up, because it was pretty bad right in front. Especially since we're already kind of in that area doing some of those commercial areas. It's only a block north and you could just swing around. The other major lodge is already taken care of as a part of a priority route, so.
It is.
But I would leave that to feedback to administration is, if you know there's a multifamily and there's a high population of seniors and we have those major snow events, that maybe we need to address those a little quicker than getting into the residential. I know it makes things a little bit more complicated, but once again, that was a very extreme situation where we had major dumps of snow, and like I said to people, we could have engaged every contractor in town and had snow removed in 3 days, but that would have cost us $500,000, so.
Martino?
And Madam Chairman, members of council, with it before you, if you have an indication that you would like to have seniors facilities placed as high as hospitals and schools, that can of course be created into a priority 1 area, if that's your desire. Our maps are based on those priority criteria. So,
If I just may add to that, I think it's far preferable that if that's something council wants to see, that it is directly considered in the policy rather than just kind of suggested. I think Mr. Shine's point is taken, is we have unofficial areas that seniors live in duplexes and all these other areas, and it gets really difficult administratively to evaluate those independent of policy guidance. And so if, for example, Evergreen operated seniors facilities were to be the metric, then it becomes easy for us to say, okay, those are the facilities that get the attention. And whether it's high traffic, whether we consider those a high traffic area versus a priority 1, but I think clear articulation is, if council has that interest, is better than not.
Okay, Mayor Zahara?
Thank you, Madam Chair, through the administration. I guess I would look for feedback from Mr. Verhage, Mr. Shine, as to where that would be the easiest as per where the equipment is going to be. I don't want them going back and forth all over town. So if it makes more sense because priority one is close, they go by there anyway, then we can include it in priority one, or if it makes more sense to do it when they're in the commercial zone. I just want to make it as seamless as possible for administration and our crews, because there's no point of our equipment going all over town. It makes things very inefficient, so.
Chairman,
Martino?
if we could give Mr. Shine some time to review what he thinks would be best for its location, but having it highlighted.
Yeah,
I think, if I may add to that, I have a little bit of a different opinion. I think the point of the policy is to tell us the priorities, because a new seniors facility could pop up in another area. I know there's not one in it, but then the point is then administration then adjusts their practices to meet the priority areas. So I think the simplest way to do it is for council to place that where they see it in the priority list, and then it becomes a part of how we would approach it operationally, unless Mr. Shine, you see that differently. But that gives us the most flexibility, I think, in terms of responsiveness. And I think where we ended up this year with, or the last few years with our seniors in a temporary facility because of maintenance or something like that, if the policy just says Evergreen senior facilities are this priority, then it doesn't matter if they get moved or adjusted. We just respond and we can adjust accordingly.
Yeah, I just want to point out too, whilst you think about those things, is along with the seniors, well, also the disabled people. We get a lot of phone calls with people, disabled people that can't access too. So let's bear those in mind.
Okay.
Would go for defining
Councillor Wilkinson?
facilities.
Okay, through the chair, I'd like to put the suggestion out that, to say, first off, thank you for the current Parkland Lodge. I think you do a very good job of cleaning it up so the ambulance is available to go. So just really adding the other two Evergreen buildings. It worked out well when Evergreen School was there. It's just unfortunate the school got pulled down, but if we could keep those three as a priority one, I'd be very happy.
Okay.
I was gonna say the exact same thing, so
Okay.
I agree. Put them at, or wherever they move to, and then just put them as priority one makes sense. Because it's dense. I do sympathize, there is seniors and disabled people, but when we're picking these buildings, because it's high population,
High density.
high density, so I think there's only three, and then it doesn't matter, like where the CEO said, if a fourth one comes about, we have a policy for this.
Okay.
Okay. Councillor Sorensen?
I was just gonna say, I would, through the chair, that I would leave it up to administration to place somewhere between emergency routes and the commercial zone, somewhere in there. It makes sense for that to go. And I don't have any particular reason to make it a priority one or a priority two. But the hospital routes and school zone seems top priority, and that would be right after that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Thanks for saying.
Yeah, my thoughts are as well as to put it, it would be nice to have everybody be in a priority one, but then nobody would be a priority. And I think where it makes sense between the priority two or the commercial zone, that makes sense operationally to put it in. Martino?
Madam Chair, members of council, just as a point of information, priority two is where we don't actually remove any snow. It's areas where we have the ability to push off to the sides or
Okay.
place it in ditches.
Okay.
So priority two is kind of
Wrong one.
it's a
Skip
selected
it.
area based on
At the end of
construction.
priority one.
And just add to that, so priority one, snow removal, and prior to removal are often happening at the same
Right.
time,
Okay.
because it's different process, different equipment.
Right.
Yeah, so generally our time frame for clearing both ones and twos that occur simultaneously within a 24-hour period. So.
Okay. Then I guess the commercial zone.
Okay, I think we have enough to
Okay.
discuss. I don't know, Mr. Hager or Mr. Shine, in
Yeah.
terms of that particular dynamic. Yep.
Councillor Bevan?
Through the chair. I know when you're doing your snow removal here and that, I've seen when your graders go down there and you plow them out and stuff like that, I can count a dozen times where there's vehicles been sitting there and you guys plowed around them every time. And I don't see anybody following along while putting a sticker on or removing them in that. 6th Avenue, well, every time you've done it, except for this last time, that one truck and trailer has been there all winter.
Oh, it looks.
And you moved it, now it's gone. And I can see a semi sitting in town here, has been there for 6 months, and you guys, since the winter's done, plowed. Do your operators not call you guys, or do you guys not go out and follow and take a look and see that there is something been plowed in for the last 5 or 6 or 7 snowfalls, and get a hold of our wildlife people or have them towed and take it to a yard, not around the corner, and have them pay, because they're sitting there for every snowfall here.
You know, we have,
And that just creates, especially on a priority route, you've got the windrows coming out, trying to get emergency vehicles down there. It's a bottleneck. It just doesn't work.
we do have those concerns highlighted with bylaw. We actually have one street in particular we haven't plowed all year because there's so many vehicles in there we can't get our equipment in. They phone and say, when are you coming to do it? At the same time, they don't move the vehicles out the way for us to get in there.
And which streets you're talking about, yeah.
So those areas have been highlighted.
You know, I mean, even that, if you need to get a rescue vehicle down there or something, ambulance, they can't down, we can't, they can't get down and we can't plow it, and we can't get those people out or whatever, something like that, and that falls back on us too. And I think, you know what, if they're not gonna move them, we go come up, we tow them, they pay the towing charge, and they pay the storage charges that the towing company has, and that, I have no problem with that.
Okay, Mayor Zahara.
Yeah, through to Councilor Bevan, I agree totally. I know that some of the challenges is some of the staffing challenges we've had on bylaw for a number of years now, and hopefully that'll be corrected this year. But I just want administration to know that you have my full support to tag and tow everybody that doesn't want to listen to the signs. We have to do a better job on signage and continue. I think we've made a lot of progress there, but I know there's a number of vehicles you can tell that have been sitting there all winter. I fully support that, and we may have to look at doing a clampdown on that, because I think we've really tried to be flexible with people, and we know tagging and towing seems simple, but I know it's a huge drain on resources, but people are just, and it's disrespectful to the neighbors who move their vehicles, and then their neighbor may even park in front of their house, and now their place in front of their house isn't getting done. So,
Thank you.
Okay. So administration has enough information to move forward? Okay, thank you. Then we will move on to the Community and Protective Services. We got the FCSS grant funding 2020, and I believe our Community Development Manager, Tanya Byers, will be presenting that.
Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
So I provided a report, and really it is what it is. Does anyone have any questions? I mean, I could talk for quite a while, but this has been a pretty long meeting already. But I guess the only addition to this is that we did, I think you all received an additional letter today for another additional request of $40,000 from the Daycare Society. So yeah, we have 3 items in front of us, and ultimately a decision needs to be made that FCSS right now, you know, we are really not in a position to put any of our grant funds out, in my opinion. And, you know, with the 3 alternatives that have been provided, if you're looking to fund these 3 requests, we need to find alternate dollars.
Okay, thank you, Tanya. We'll open it for questions. Councillor Bevan?
Through the chair, I see you put these 3 down here and that, but I think you forgot one here which has not got any funding for the last 2 years, is the Edson Senior Transportation Services. They've been turned down twice now.
That's not an FCSS grant.
Well, it goes to you guys, to community service and that's what I'm trying to get at. So, but anyway, we'll digress on that one. I'm going to say that we put this on hold, because I know there's 3 other groups out there that are doing exactly the same thing, and they're all asking for money in that. And we do not know what's going to happen with the government coming up here, with apparently the whole works in that. And especially with like the Boys and Girls Club, we funded them $40,000 for what, maybe the last 5 years, which is $200,000. Plus we give them $200,000 in kind. Plus they pay a nominal rent of $4,800 where the going rent in town is $3,500 per month for $43,000. And you know, to me, they're getting. We have a building over here with the doctors in it that is paying what, $18,000 to $20,000 a month, and it's a town building. And you know, I'd like to see this put on hold right now, and we discuss this more and see what's going to happen. And that if we can't, either that we split it 3 ways or whatever. and do it that way. And we don't have to find any more money. Everybody gets $13,000 or something like that, whichever way you guys decide you want to do it. But I'm not in favor of giving one 40,000, maybe not the others anything at all, and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chenard?
I would kind of agree with him, but I'm looking at, we've always funded the Boys and Girls Club for some time period, so I'm not against putting a hold because we have 3 requests, and I know nothing about what these do honestly, so I believe that in fairness to the Boys and Girls Club, we give them a partial thing, because we're gonna put them into purpose hardship, so if they're planning January 1, we get this funding. So I agree that we need to review it. I would like an update because I'm seeing the 3 organizations. I don't want to fault any of them. Maybe it's right that they're all doing the same thing and maybe it should be a split, but we need to definitely consider it. The Boys and Girls Club, because we funded them, it wouldn't be fair, even though the Alberta government did it to us, they chopped us and now we're scrambling. But because the Boys and Girls Club have been funded for many years and they are part of our community, I'm not against saying, okay, if you normally get 40,000, maybe meet with them and say, what would it look like to fund you for the first 3 months so we can review the other, because if there's 3 of them all doing the same thing, I don't know, but I'd like to know. So if we could maybe consider funding them for the first 3 months, so we don't purposely put them into hardship. We are not the Alberta government. We don't like doing that to people. And then review all 3 and see, are all 3 really doing the same thing? I would like to see that.
Councillor Curry?
I have a comment, but first I have a question. When do our grants usually, sorry, through the chair, when do our grants usually go out?
Through the chair, it does vary, and typically right now, like, do you guys have a copy of the grants that went out last year?
Yeah.
Okay, and so typically, there's some that go usually right away in the new year, and so Telecare is one of them, and nobody else provides that service that Telecare does. And the Seniors Days is one that was just new that we did last year. So that one went out later in the year. Connections was like November, I think. Activities, Reflections, that's another one that's kind of been an ongoing grant every year. And so that goes out early in the new year typically. The Needle Exchange program was later in the year. So it just really depends. Like some of them are recurring grants and some of them are sort of like special project, just happened last year, new initiatives, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, one more?
I comment now. I do think that currently we do need to put this on hold. It's a large amount, 40,000, and I think until we know what our funding is, we already are at risk of having to increase our budget to support what could be missing from our own FCS programming, and I do think that that has to be a priority. But before making a decision on the grant, I would like to see what the 3 programs are, what is the historics of why. My understanding is that there was a missing need within the community, and that is how we started funding the Boys and Girls Club. And now we have 3 organizations within the community doing the same thing. And I have concerns about overlap and then how is that working, and should there be partnerships going on. The whole new FCS framework that the government is saying that we need to be doing is all about partnerships. So I need to see how come we have 3 requesting. That's $120,000 for the same program. So when we look at that FCS model and the spokes, that's the same spoke getting for 3 organizations. So when this comes, I would like to see, for that grant, okay, what is the difference between the services, what are they providing, and how come? So that's where I stand on that. Thank you.
Councillor Sorensen?
Through the chair, I would agree with Councillor Bevan and Councillor Curry that we should be putting a hold on grant pending provincial decision. But I would look at it a slightly different way. I believe it's unfortunate the province has proceeded the way they did, but I think it gives us an opportunity to stop, assess the situation, and think of a new way moving forward. And I would like the new process to be a fairer system that's based on results or deliverables that are actually having an impact on those target population groups. And so I'm not sure all of these programs are equally effective, and I don't know, there's professionals in the room that know how to assess the effectiveness of programs. And, but not just the grant programs, I would include ParentLink in this discussion as well. These programs need to be effective, they need to have deliverables, and yeah, so that we can make fair decisions.
If I could
Tanya?
add, through the chair to Councillor Sorensen. Presently, FCSS, we do have an application process, and it does speak to outcomes and the FCSS deliverables and whatnot. Currently, we do have the full application from the Boys and Girls Club, also from CORE, and but the Daycare Society has never filled one of those out, so this letter is the first that we've heard of their interest. You know, and the other thing that we're doing, and it's part of one of the strategic priorities, is we're working really hard at a new format with different levels of applications, I guess, for projects. And we hope to have that also ready by April 1st. So we do already have a system in place, but we're trying to, we're creating a system where we can actually grade it. And at the end of it, we'll say, okay, is it meeting what we need, the community need that we're looking for?
Okay, I'll reply.
Can I just have a follow-up for that through the chair? Yeah, so just getting back to my point, that I think this is a great time for us to stop and assess this, like, and think of a new way forward, not based on what was done in the past. So I'm not interested in looking at the past 10 years of what we've given to this group and what we did to that group. Well, I shouldn't say I'm not interested, but I think this is an opportune time for us to move forward and in a fair new system.
Sue Derricott?
Councillor Bevan. I agree with Councillor Sorensen. We put a stop, you know, we assess, we look at it too. But I also like to say to council too is that, you know, there was the Boys and Girls Club and then the daycare center. They're doing exactly the same thing, and that yet they're surviving without any of our grants and stuff like that too. And now we've got a third one coming on, and they're also not going to be up and running here, and they are running, and they're surviving in that too. So I mean, it just doesn't make sense if we pick one out of three and don't do anything with it and that. And if you, council will go down and just take a tour of these facilities, all of them, and ask the questions and see what they're doing and find out, you know, and you'll find that they're pretty well doing all the same. And there is a need in the community, because when you look at one or two of them and they have a waiting list of people trying to get on or whatever and that, and then a third one opens up and they take it up, and that, it's well worth its while. So I think, you know, we should just wait and see what happens.
Mayor Zahara?
Yes, thank you. I think I'm very concerned about overlap of services in our community. I know when I was president of the Boys and Girls Club, when we had the after-school program and the Daycare Society started their program. But that service was already being provided, now we have a third one providing that service. And I know the historics of the town that helped start the Boys and Girls Club. But I think that we do need a fair policy and process. I think we have to make sure it aligns with the new provincial spoke model. I think that we need to, relook at things, push for collaboration instead of competition, ensuring that gaps are met, and providing a budget line for FCSS to grant those organizations the funds necessary, as long as they're meeting the appropriate priorities and targets for our community. We're just seeing the start of the rush of people coming to the town of Edson for money for nonprofits. We have one organization in town that just laid off 20 staff, and they've been absolutely gutted because they lost their government contracts. They don't know what's going to happen. So we're going to have huge gaps in services. We're going to notice it, especially over the next year. I'm concerned how the government has done this. I think they should have taken a more collaborative approach and maybe did it over a year so people could plan accordingly. And unfortunately, it's going to land up in our laps. And I know that's a concern that I heard from the mayors at our finance meeting last week in Edmonton. That everybody's just getting bombarded with requests. I don't think we're in a position to make those decisions because it has a real impact to taxation in our community. So I'm fine with putting this on hold. And I think our first priority has to be our own programs and services before we look at funding outside organizations, and people may not be happy about that. But I can encourage them to then contact their MLA and the appropriate ministers responsible. But hopefully by April we'll have more answers and come up with a better solution.
I also want to comment that I agree. I'm concerned about overlap of services, but I also understand that the 3 after-school programs are at general max capacities as well. So I would be interested in hearing more about that so we can be fair in this. And I'm also interested in waiting until we can find out what our own funding situation is, because it's pretty hard to make a decision right now when we don't know where we're going to be at in a few months. So, Councillor Sorensen, or Chouinard, sorry.
I'm gonna have to shave my head. Just so I understand that, so if the province goes through, so to keep us as status quo last year, we're gonna be short 117,000. Is that with those 2 requests or not? Like there's 2 new requests of 40 each, is that included or not?
No, so through the chair, the 117,000 is the money that we were expecting from ParentLink next year.
And it will be 0?
And at this point, it's 0. So if we're unsuccessful, our ParentLink services as we know it are done.
Right, because that's, but I'm just trying to wrap, we're all deciding, and I agree, it was unfair to every town and community what the province did. So I'm thinking if it's 117 to go status quo, because my fear is if we hold off, are the programs going to be like, you know, you made a comment and laid off, you know, 20 people, and it'll take a while. So my problem is all these groups are planning for their 2020 year. Nobody counted on the province doing it. So our worst case scenario to stay status quo for 2020 would be a bill of 117,000. And then at that time, so we say, okay, we will fund it for a year, because I don't want to put you in the same scenario like I'm repeating myself, the province did to us. It is our program, and we've offered them for years, and it's our people that will suffer through ParentLink, et cetera.
Yeah, thank you.
If
I may, just a few things I think we need to clarify. That we are contracted to provide a provincial program.
Okay.
They are not town programs directly. So I think that's an important part of it, is those programs have always been funded through provincial processes. If I may just add, I think there's been a few councillors around the table that have, some directly or others saying, I think we're at a point in time, and this is being forced upon us, but it is not necessarily all bad if it forces us to really think hardly, and answer some difficult questions about what resources we have and where the biggest gaps in our service provision as a community exist, and they may not be the same answers that they were last year or for the last several years, and we may be forced to do some things differently and maybe even better or more efficiently as part of this. I'm not saying I'm pleased with the circumstances, but there may be some consequences that actually help us to address some things a little bit differently than we have been. And one question that I'm hoping to have some clarification on for our benefit as well is, I think it's been pretty clear that council's in favor of holding off on allocation of grants. With the existing operations of the Boys and Girls Club, does council have appetite to support prorating their funding through the first part of the year for the funding that we do know that we're getting? That would, I think, be helpful clarification as well.
Okay, Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, this is just what I was going to ask about. I do agree that we need to have a real review of what services we're offering in the town, but also, as our mayor has stated, the town went in conjunction with the Boys and Girls Club when it originally started, and to me, I thought the whole program was to change lifestyles and sort of contributing individuals to character development, basic life skills, and I don't know if that still is carried on. And I also wondered if it's similar to Evergreen Foundation, where it's subsidized housing. Is this subsidized daycare? Like, are any of those rates based on the parents' time 150? Do you know?
Through the chair, I believe that all of them can get the subsidies because they're all, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think everyone is eligible to apply because they're all accredited, right?
Okay.
Yes, any families that have a financial need are able to apply to the government of Alberta to receive subsidy to attend our out-of-school care program.
Okay, that's what I thought it was set up for. Really, in the first place, the Boys and Girls Club, I thought to help those really in need. And seeing as we have funded them previously, I really feel that we should carry them at least January, February, March until they can find out what they need to do, because there are those vulnerable children. And they're probably at core as well, but we have not funded core previously, so it's not like we're leaving them in the lurch. We are leaving the Boys and Girls Club in the lurch. That's just my opinion.
And through the chair, the amount for the first 3 months, if we were to continue, prorating for those 3 months would be $7,500 is what would be allocated to the Boys and Girls Club.
And do we have any of that?
Pardon?
Do we have any of that already? Okay, good.
Okay, Councillor Curry.
I would be in support of prorating, seeing as though we have the funds and our funds have not changed to the end of March.
Okay, Councillor Sorensen.
Yeah, I'd be in support of that as well, but I think a letter should go out immediately that as of April 1st, we're reevaluating all the programs and that no further funding should be assumed.
Yeah.
If I may, some of those preliminary conversations have already happened, but we can certainly formalize that based on the conversation that council's had this evening.
Okay. Tanya?
Through the chair, I would also actually like some direction, I guess, on the others, like reflections, activity days, and the ones that have been those ongoing that they've come to count on. Like telecare is also a really important service that, you know, is that something that we also want to carry forward on this basis?
Okay, Councillor Sorensen.
Through the chair, I think all of these programs need to be evaluated at the exact same time and for their effectiveness on their target group. I'm sure, like I know a lot, I have some experience with some of these and they seem great to me, but I'm not a professional that can evaluate if Seniors Day is effectively reaching the mental and physical needs of seniors and reaching the goals for that particular program. So I think all of these need to be evaluated at the same time for results and effectiveness.
Through the chair, we're actually going through that process right now because the contracts all end at the end of December. And so then they're given about a month to create these outcome reports and whatnot. That reporting is expected when they have the grants. So we're just in the process of collecting that information, and I can provide it to you once we have it.
Okay. Councillor Chenard?
Like all these programs I'm hearing in there, and I'd be supportive of for the first 3 months, so January, February, March. So if any of these are in the same criteria, you know, I don't know, I'm looking at the Sacred Hearts and all the different ones, recycling all the ones, so I don't know if they're in the hardship, but I mean, I agree, we do have a request, and I agree we need to reevaluate. There used to be 1, now there's 3, so I don't want to see any of them. So if any of them need a request for the first 3 months to carry on the program, and then I agree we need to review them all. It was forced upon us due to cutbacks. We need to figure out who's responsible. I like to comment in the room. You don't like to get a hold of your MLA and let him voice his opinion because it was put on our lap. So any of them that would need the first 3 months to carry on programming, that gives you time to do your job in review, and yet we didn't paralyze them, and I think 3 months is fair. So they're all getting warning. If they need to be prorated, we're only paying you for 3 months, and at that time, we're gonna review, and sometimes it's just not gonna be a great outcome. But with the letter we disclose, also contact your MLA. It was his boss that put this on us.
Thank you.
So Tanya, can you just clarify that if that amount you gave, the 7,000, was that for all of the FCSS grants, or was that just the Boys and Girls Club grant?
Yeah, just the Boys and Girls Club.
Okay.
I think if I may, yeah, I think that with that general feedback in terms of proration, not all of these programs are the same. Some of them are event specific, and so it's different to say, hey, sorry, we are not going to fund your event this year, versus a program-based operation. And so with the blessing of council, I think we would allow Tanya and her team to evaluate those which are program based, which we may consider proration. And unfortunately for those that are event based, I think council has given clear direction that they want us to hold off until we know what our own needs are for our own programs, and that some additional evaluation could be done. I think that may sum up the conversation effectively.
Councillor Bevan?
Yeah, no, when I said that we hold back, I disagree that we do not give them 3 months funding, because where does it start and that? I believe we're gonna hold back on it and look at it. We look at it from now going forward here, and we do not prorate anybody. I don't care which club would have came to us, I'm gonna say the same thing, so I disagree.
Okay, Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I don't see Seniors Transportation Society. Are they not part of the FCSS grant summary?
No, through the chair, the ESTS or anything transportation related
Oh.
cannot go through FCSS dollars. There is no
Sorry, I
provincial
don't recognize
FCSS.
all the government red tape.
And I know it seems
Okay.
confusing because we do have a role in discussion and
Right,
that sort of thing
exactly,
because,
okay.
but because they serve vulnerable individuals. But the transportation itself cannot come from FCSS
Okay, sorry,
programming.
I just thought it was forgotten about the list.
No.
Councillor Sorensen?
Through the chair, however, I believe we could assess them at the same time as all of these programs.
Well, I would
So,
expect we
because
are.
for instance, we're looking at seniors program, we should include that in, or vulnerable group services. It should
Yeah.
be included in the discussion
Yeah.
and in the pie chart.
Anybody else?
So I think we beat this to that.
Yes, I think I do. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you, Tanya, for that. Then we will move on to questions from the media and public regarding items from this committee of the whole meeting.
You're the last one standing.
I'm good.
Anya?
Anybody else? Okay. Then I will get a motion to move in camera.
Break.
May I suggest a brief recess?
Oh, okay. All right, so we'll move for a 5-minute recess,
Right.
and then we will move in camera after that. Or do we need a motion for that?
Don't need a vote.
We don't need a vote? Okay. Oh, he already left, so. So, okay.
I'll
All
make a
right,
motion
we'll
to go in-
get out of our
in
recess here.
Closed session.
Okay, so Councillor Wilkinson makes a motion to go into a closed meeting session, which is on that third-party development, FOIP section 16(1)A, 2, and B. All in favor?
I should laugh when you read that.
Okay.
That confidential too.
Okay, and I'll get a motion that the meeting be adjourned. Councillor Chenard makes that motion. All in favor? Motion carried.